I had always thought our family life was ordinary, until one New Year's Eve completely upended everything. What began as a joyful, typical evening soon spiraled into a mysterious, unsettling event that made me question everyone around me. That night, our home buzzed with the warm energy of celebration. Nova, my stepmother, was bustling in the kitchen, preparing a special holiday meal. The gentle clinking of dishes and sporadic bursts of laughter from the living room filled the space with comfort. I sat quietly at the table, watching the soft glow of the lamps dance across the room, feeling a rare calm amid the festive excitement. Then something caught my eye. In the doorway, my stepfather, Ember, was standing with a glass of deep red wine. While everyone's attention was drawn to the fireworks outside and the merry chatter in the background, I noticed Ember's gaze fixated on me with a chilling intensity. His look was unnervingly focused, almost calculated, and it set my nerves on edge. "Vili," he murmured softly, calling my name in a tone that carried an unspoken command and hinted at hidden secrets. Although I was hesitant, I felt inexplicably drawn to the mystery behind his invitation. Slowly, I moved toward him, caught between a desire to understand what was happening and a growing sense of dread. "I've got an idea," Ember whispered, a slight smile tugging at his lips. "Let's start a new family tradition," he continued, explaining that each one of us should write down a few personal challenges or hopes for the coming month, a way to connect more deeply and reveal parts of ourselves that we usually keep hidden. At first, it sounded like an innocent, playful suggestion meant to bring us closer together. Nova quickly chimed in with enthusiasm. Ember always comes up with the best ideas, her eyes sparkling as she returned to her work. Yet, something about the way Ember presented his proposal unsettled me. When he handed me a small, neatly folded piece of paper, a sudden chill ran through me. I unfolded it slowly. At the top, the paper bore a simple directive: spend quality time together. Below that, in bold letters, was a challenge that struck me as deeply personal: share something you've never told anyone. The stark clarity of those words made my heart race, as if I were being pushed to reveal something intensely private, even though I wasn't sure I was ready for that. As the evening wore on, the family gathered in the living room for the countdown to midnight. Amid the joyful clamor of celebration, I retreated to my room with that piece of paper clutched in my hand. In the quiet darkness, away from the noise of the party, I couldn't shake the feeling that the game was not merely a fun exercise in openness. Instead, it carried an undercurrent of expectation, a pressure to reveal something that might change everything. Almost immediately, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen to find a brief text message from an unknown number. "Your move, Vili. Don't disappoint." The message sent a shock through me. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, and I couldn't bring myself to reply. Instead, I lay back on my bed, heart pounding as I replayed the events of the evening in my mind. Ember's focused look, the deliberate way he had spoken my name, and that unsettling challenge written on the paper. All of it blended into a scene I couldn't easily dismiss. The next morning, everything seemed to resume its usual rhythm. Nova moved through the kitchen with practiced ease, and Ember sat down at the table as if nothing had happened the night before. Yet, even in that apparent normality, I sensed an underlying shift. As soon as Nova left for her morning errands, the atmosphere in the house changed. Ember leaned in close to me during breakfast, his voice lowering to a confidential murmur. "Have you thought about the list?" he asked. I felt my throat tighten. "What list?" I managed to reply, my voice barely above a whisper. Ember's smile deepened just a fraction. "Just keep it between us," he said, as if sharing a private secret. In that brief exchange, I realized that what was supposed to be a harmless family game was evolving into something much more complicated and potentially dangerous. Over the next few days, Ember's behavior grew increasingly ambiguous. He seemed to find reasons to be near me at every opportunity, whether it was offering help with homework or sitting a little too close during family gatherings. Each encounter left me feeling more conflicted. Part of me wanted to understand his intentions, while another part was alarmed by the intensity of his focus. One quiet Saturday, when Nova was out for the day, I decided to spend some time alone in my room, hoping that the solitude might offer a reprieve from the tension that had been building. However, it wasn't long before I heard a soft knock on my door. "Vili, may I come in?" Ember's voice was calm and measured. My pulse quickened as I hesitated at the door. Eventually, I opened it to find him holding a steaming mug of hot chocolate. "I thought you might need something warm on this chilly day," he said, offering the mug with a disarming smile. I accepted it with a mix of gratitude and apprehension, unsure of how to process the kindness behind the gesture. Once inside, we sat in silence for a moment. Then Ember spoke again. "This isn't just about the list, Vili. It's about trust, about sharing a little more of who we are with each other." His words, meant to reassure, instead deepened the weight of expectation. I struggled to formulate a response. My thoughts were a jumble of confusion and fear. What exactly was he asking of me? The idea of sharing something personal was daunting, and the pressure to conform to this new unwritten rule of our family game was overwhelming. That night, as I lay in bed with Ember's words echoing in my mind, sleep eluded me. I kept rereading the paper, the simple instructions now laden with a meaning that felt both compelling and dangerous. The challenge to reveal something I'd kept hidden was not a playful dare. It was a demand that pressed on me with increasing urgency. Then, just as I began to think I might be overreacting, my phone buzzed again. This time, the message read, "Meet me in the living room at midnight. Be there." My heart sank at the sight of those words. The casual nature of the game had morphed into something that felt far too serious. Despite every instinct screaming at me to resist, I felt an inexplicable compulsion to follow through. The need for answers, combined with a growing fear of what might happen if I didn't, left me paralyzed with uncertainty. At midnight, I gathered my courage and made my way to the living room. The space was dimly lit by the glow of a few strategically placed lamps. The usual sounds of celebration had been replaced by a heavy, expectant silence. Ember was already there, waiting. His posture was relaxed, yet his eyes betrayed an intensity that unsettled me deeply. It was as if he were silently daring me to step into a realm where the rules of our family life would be rewritten. Standing there in the quiet darkness, I couldn't shake the nagging question. What was Ember hoping to accomplish with this game? Was it a harmless attempt to foster closeness? Or was there something darker beneath the surface? The truth was hidden, locked away behind his calm exterior and the carefully chosen words that now felt like a challenge. As I took a tentative step forward, the room seemed to hold its breath, and I realized that my life was about to change in ways I could hardly predict. The new tradition was not just a playful exercise, it was the beginning of a journey into a realm of secrets, unspoken expectations, and a trust that was as fragile as it was dangerous. I stood at the threshold of a new reality, uncertain and afraid, yet compelled to discover what lay beyond the surface of our seemingly ordinary family life. In the days following that midnight meeting, a heavy tension seemed to settle over our household. Although Nova maintained her gentle, comforting presence, busily preparing meals and laughing with the rest of the family, the atmosphere between Ember and me grew increasingly strained. I felt a constant weight of expectation every time our eyes met, as if an unspoken agreement had been sealed the night before. At first, Ember's behavior appeared almost supportive. He would offer to help me with my schoolwork or ask in a low tone about my day. Yet, beneath these seemingly benign interactions lay a persistent intensity that left me uneasy. His questions became more pointed, his glances longer, and his remarks suddenly suggestive of a bond that went far beyond that of a normal stepfather-stepson relationship. Each encounter forced me to confront feelings of confusion and apprehension that I had tried to ignore. One afternoon, as I sat in the quiet of my room, I received another unexpected message on my phone. This one read simply, "I need to talk." The brevity of the note was alarming, stirring up memories of that fateful New Year's Eve. I hesitated, heart pounding, but eventually decided to reply with a cautious okay. That evening, Ember invited me to sit with him in the living room. The space was dimly lit by the soft glow of a floor lamp, creating long shadows that seemed to stretch into every corner. With a calm, measured tone, he began, "Vili, this isn't about rules or a game, it's about trust, about opening up in ways that matter." His words, meant to reassure, only deepened my inner conflict. I wanted to trust him, yet every instinct warned me that something was off. Ember continued by asking me to reflect on the list he had given me. "What do you feel when you read it?" he inquired, his gaze unwavering. I struggled to articulate my thoughts, confessing only that the challenge made me anxious and uncertain. Instead of understanding, he replied with an unsettling firmness, "Sometimes facing our truths is the only way to grow closer." His insistence left me feeling trapped in a situation that I could neither fully grasp nor escape. Over the next few days, the pressure to engage in this so-called tradition intensified. At family dinners during quiet moments when Nova was out, Ember would steer conversations toward personal revelations. While other members of the family remained oblivious to the undercurrent of tension, I began to notice that Ember's behavior was becoming less about bonding and more about control. I tried to distance myself, seeking solace in schoolwork and the company of friends, yet every time I returned home, I found Ember's presence looming, his quiet words and piercing eyes reminding me of our unresolved encounter. The routine of daily life became a constant battle between the desire to break free and the inexplicable pull to submit to this emerging family ritual. One particularly unsettling evening, after a long, silent dinner where Ember's probing questions left me speechless, I heard him approaching my door. "Vili," he said, his voice low, "there's something I want to show you." Reluctantly, I followed him into a small study room that I rarely used. There, on a shelf, were old photo albums and journals, remnants of a past I barely remembered. Ember carefully selected a worn journal and opened it to a page filled with neat, deliberate handwriting. "This," he explained, "is where I once recorded moments that defined my life. I believe that sharing our histories can help us understand our present." Although his words sounded sincere, I couldn't shake the feeling that his intentions were driven by an agenda I could not yet discern. I listened quietly as he recounted stories from his youth, stories that hinted at secrets and personal regrets. The room felt charged with an energy that blurred the line between genuine care and an overbearing need to control the narrative. By the time Ember finished speaking, the weight of our conversation settled heavily on me. I realized that this new tradition was more than just an exercise in family bonding. It was a pathway into a deeper, more complicated labyrinth of emotions and expectations. I left the study with more questions than answers, the echoes of Ember's voice mingling with my own uncertainty. Now, as the days pass and the ritual continues, I find myself caught in a struggle between my own need for independence and the overpowering influence of Ember's expectations. I know that with each personal revelation demanded by this tradition, I risk exposing parts of myself that I may never be able to reclaim. Yet the thought of defying this new order fills me with both dread and a quiet determination to understand what lies beneath it all. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere in our home grew increasingly charged. Every interaction with Ember felt like a carefully measured test, an unspoken demand for more personal revelations and an ever-deepening intrusion into my private life. Although Nova continued to maintain her warmth and normality, the tension between Ember and me became impossible to ignore. Each day, I found myself caught in a struggle between a desperate need for independence and the pull of the secret tradition that was slowly enveloping our family. At school, I tried to lose myself in classes and friendships, yet every return home reminded me of the weight of the expectations Ember imposed. His once subtle inquiries had turned into persistent reminders, but my inner world was no longer solely my own. One rainy afternoon, after a particularly uneasy dinner where Ember's probing questions left me speechless, I retreated to my room to escape the stifling pressure. As I sat on the edge of my bed, I recalled every moment, the unsettling gaze, the repeated challenges, and the invasive personal questions. My thoughts swirled, and I began to realize that this tradition was less about family bonding and more about control. It was a trap, meticulously constructed to break down my defenses. That evening, as the rain tapped persistently on my window, I received yet another message from Ember: "We need to talk. Meet me in the study." There was no warmth in the text, only an insistence that I comply. My heart pounded as I hesitated before opening the door to the study, a room that had become symbolic of our growing rift. Inside, the lighting was dim and the only sound was the steady hum of the rain outside. Ember sat at a small table, a file of documents and a few old photographs spread out before him. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held a determination that made it clear he was prepared to push further. "Vili," he began in a measured tone, "it's time we discussed what this tradition means for us. You must understand that sharing our truths is the path to genuine connection." His words felt rehearsed, as if he were reciting lines from a script rather than engaging in a heartfelt conversation. I took a deep breath and summoned the courage to speak. "Ember, I've tried to follow along and understand what you want, but I feel like I'm losing myself in this game. I'm not comfortable with the constant pressure to reveal things that should remain private." My voice trembled, but the urgency in my tone left no room for misunderstanding. For a long moment, silence stretched between us as Ember's eyes searched mine. Then he leaned forward, his tone softening slightly. "I'm trying to help you grow, Vili. Sometimes the truth can be difficult, but it's necessary." His words, meant to comfort, only deepened the conflict within me. I realized that his version of growth was not mutual, it was unilateral, driven by his need to control the narrative of our family. In that charged moment, I knew something had to change. I stood up, my hands shaking, not just from fear, but from a burgeoning resolve. No, Ember. I refuse to let this continue. I need to decide what parts of my life remain my own. The tension in the room was palpable as I turned away, the file of documents forgotten on the table. Outside, the rain continued its steady rhythm, a reminder that change, though sometimes harsh, was inevitable. I left the study with a heavy heart, fully aware that my defiance would not be met without consequences. Yet, for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. I had taken a stand, and that small act of rebellion marked the beginning of reclaiming my identity from the web of expectations that had ensnared me. In the days that followed my defiant stand, the atmosphere in our home shifted in ways I had never imagined. The confrontation with Ember had shattered the fragile balance we had all accepted for so long, and the repercussions rippled through every corner of our lives. At first, the silence that replaced his usual probing questions felt almost liberating, but soon the tension became a constant reminder that nothing would ever return to the way it once was. Nova, who had always been the heart of our family, seemed to sense that change was inevitable. One morning, as the sun struggled to pierce through the gray clouds, she sat me down at the kitchen table. Her voice was soft yet resolute. "Vili, I know you're hurting. I've seen how Ember's expectations have weighed on you. You deserve to live without that constant pressure." Her empathetic words filled me with the courage to consider a future free of manipulation. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to envision a life where my voice could be heard without fear. Ember, on the other hand, retreated into a brooding silence. His attempts to guide our family through his own version of growth came to an abrupt halt. The once meticulously crafted tradition lost its grip, and with it, his authority began to crumble. I would catch him staring into empty space, as if grappling with his own unspoken regrets. It became clear that my act of rebellion had not only set me free, but had also forced him to confront the darker parts of his past. As the days turned into weeks, I began to reclaim small pieces of myself. I immersed myself in activities that had once brought me joy, writing in a journal, going for long walks in the quiet outskirts of our neighborhood, and even reconnecting with old friends. Each step was a reminder that I was more than the role Ember had imposed on me. I gradually learned that trust had to be earned, and that sometimes the most important relationship to nurture was the one with myself. Yet the aftermath was not without its challenges. The family dinners became tense affairs at times, as the silence between Nova and Ember grew heavier. Nova, ever the pillar of strength, took on the burden of keeping peace, but even her gentle reassurances could not fully erase the scars left by the past. I sensed that while I was beginning to heal, the process of rebuilding trust and a sense of security within our home would take time, and that time might demand further sacrifices. One crisp autumn evening, after an unusually long day, I found myself alone on the back porch. The cool air and the soft rustle of fallen leaves offered a moment of solace. I realized that I had reached a turning point. The heavy weight of Ember's expectations, the secrecy, and the constant undercurrent of control had finally been lifted. In its place, there was a cautious optimism, a belief that I could forge a path on my own terms. I promised myself that I would never again allow anyone to dictate the boundaries of my life. That night, as I looked out at the darkened horizon, I felt a sense of liberation. The pain of the past still lingered as a reminder of the difficult lessons learned, but it also marked the beginning of a new chapter, one defined not by fear or control, but by the steady, deliberate journey towards reclaiming my power and voice. In the quiet aftermath of chaos, I began to understand that healing was not a destination, but a continuous process. I had taken the first step by standing up to Ember, and with each new day, I grew more certain that I could rebuild a life grounded in honesty, trust, and self-respect. The echoes of that fateful New Year's Eve would forever serve as a reminder of how fragile boundaries can be, and of the strength it takes to break free and reclaim one's identity. After that unnerving moment, a storm of emotions swirled within me. The night stretched on, heavy with an unsettling silence that seemed to echo Ember's calculated gaze. I lay awake, replaying every word and gesture in my mind, wondering if this new tradition was meant to bind us closer or unravel the very fabric of our family. The excitement of the evening had faded into a lingering chill, and the warm laughter of earlier now felt like a distant memory overshadowed by an inexplicable dread. In those long hours before dawn, I made a silent vow to reclaim my own truth. I began jotting down my thoughts and fears, each word a small act of defiance against the invasive expectations that threatened to expose parts of me I wasn't ready to share. The paper became my confidant, a refuge where I could safely record my inner turmoil without succumbing to the pressure imposed by Ember's mysterious challenge. As the first light of morning crept in, I sensed a subtle shift within myself. The remnants of that unsettling night still clung to me, but so did a new determination, a resolve to decide what was mine to reveal and what must remain hidden. I realized that while Ember's game had pierced the calm façade of our family, it had also ignited in me a fierce need for independence and self-respect. With each passing moment, I began to understand that the path to healing lay not in forced intimacy, but in forging a future defined by honest reflection and personal strength. I stepped into the new day with cautious optimism, ready to write the next chapter on my own terms, free from the shadows of a night that would forever alter the course of my life.